Step number one is just notice that you're being stuck in your head. Notice it. An activity I want you to do right now, and I've done this with so many clients I can't even count, but just put your hands to your face, open your fingers, and do it in such a way, just like this, where you can see out through your fingers, but they're impeding your vision. Now slowly lower them down to your side. And this is this is an illustration of being stuck in your head. When you're stuck in your head, basically everything centers around your brain, but you can't see anything clearly. And you know that because you know your brain's not functioning as well. You know you're not as social. You've lost your sense of humor. You've lost your sense of creativity. You know that you don't solve problems very well. I mean, you know that internally that you're not at a healthy spot, but you want to get out of it. I can think of many times driving over to the studio to do this podcast that I get stuck in my head. What am I going to say? I'm going to say the wrong thing, this or that. And so I have to practice this consistently. And I think at times I really don't do as good a job as I do at other times. Sometimes I just kind of rush right into it, which is one of the things and one of the ways to get out of your head, which I'm going to talk about, but just notice it. Notice how your body is changing, how your breathing is changing, how the content of your thinking is changing, how it's very fear-based. Just notice it and then say, hey, I'm stuck in my head, or there goes that anxiety again, or there goes that fear again. And be kind to it. Don't judge yourself, but just notice, become aware. When I'm going to prepare to speak and I notice myself going over and over the content again and again, I'm over preparing, that's when I'm stuck in my head. Or if I'm going on a date or meeting a new person or going on a second date, it's very tempting to want to get stuck in my head. How can I plan this thing perfectly, make them like me, so to say? And I had a gal recently tell me she went on a really, really good first date, and then she has some anxiety about the second date. Because it was so good on the first date, she's worried and thinking, well, how can I make that as good as the other one? And I said, well, where'd you leave off? And she said, well, we left off just laughing, having fun. It was a really great connection. Well, why can't you start there again? Well, because I'm going to think about it. I'm thinking about it now. And so we talked about some of the same content. So step number 2 is you have to get it out. You recognize that you got something in your head and it's keeping you stuck, but you got to get it out in some form or fashion. I mean, one great way to get it out is to talk to somebody about it. So you have your trusted friends, I call these my monkeys, and I go and talk to them and say, hey, I'm really worried about this situation. And you really open up about it and tell them and be vulnerable. And then whatever feedback they give you can give you a new perspective to see that there's a different way of looking at this situation. It could be direct encouragement, like you've done this before, and I know you can handle this, or here's what I would do in your situation. I just end up letting go, and who cares? And like as the cliche goes, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be relationally. So then you can think, well, I can go in there and, totally be anxious or whatever and have just a horrible conversation. But if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I mean, they'll see that part of me. They'll understand me better. They'll know that I do have this struggle and they can show compassion for that, or they can see you get out of it though and say maybe you get tempted and you can get out of it. And then that builds the relationship as well. It's kind of like conflict. We can think conflict destroys or damages relationships when generally it's a catalyst in healthy relationships to go deeper and to the next level and to have this and to see that you can work through things together, which bonds people. So you get it out. In some ways you can do that is talking to people, but you can also do it if you don't have people around. You can do it through journaling. So you can just write about what you're afraid of. What is that thing that you think about right now over and over again that you're anxious about? And then you can answer some simple basic questions like what's the worst possible outcome in this situation if it goes wrong? How will I handle it if the worst possible outcome occurs? And you write that down. When you see it on paper, it's clearer. When you see it on paper, oftentimes we can look at it and say, I shouldn't be worried about that. That's not really that big of a deal because we're looking at it concretely on paper. So another question is, what evidence do I have that this fear is actually going to become reality? And you probably have some legitimate evidence, but you also probably have a lot of evidence that's not legitimate or that you think is evidence from the past or other situations that you're cherry picking because you've had success, but you're not really focusing on those things that are actually successful and related to that fear that you have. So you've gotten over it before, you've dealt with these things in the past well, or that it won't be as bad as you think it's going to be, or it's just not that big of a deal. You have a way to think about it differently. And then how does it benefit me to think this way is a great question. Let's see, what's the payoff? The payoff is going to be safety, but just seeing that on paper that I'm trying to stay safe. I'm damaging my mental health by playing it safe, by taking the path of least resistance. That can change people, just that one activity.